What's up guys, War History Geek here, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be showcasing the Finnish Model 1940 Wärtsilä domestically produced combat helmet for the Second World War. Now I wanted to do a video on this because I was actually very fortunate to find one of these at a local flea market a couple years ago now for only $10. Now you'll see soon enough that the condition of this is very poor. However, I'm still happy to say that I own one regardless, as they're an extremely seldomly seen Axis helmet these days from the Second World War. So just the basics is, this is basically known as a domestically produced copy of the Swedish model 1937 helmet. And it kind of was used a little bit after that, but that's the main thing there. So but a little bit of background from where it comes from in Sweden. Starting in 1936, the Swedish government had devised a plan to rearm and re-equip their military, as both Germany and the USSR became more hostile. In about 1937, they looked for a new design to replace the M1926 helmet that they had been using. And they were looking for essentially just a simpler way to manufacture it and also a more effective helmet design, and they came up with the model 1937. So before 1940, coming back to Finland now, before 1940, the country had used several different models of helmets purchased from various other countries. However, through the wish of uniformity as well as in preparation for growing hostilities, much like Sweden, they began looking into domestically manufacturing their own helmets. And they hadn't decided exactly if they wanted to design their own or if they wanted to purchase the rights to a different design yet. However, they finally decided, as a result of friendly relations with Sweden and the War Material Patent Agreement signed between the two nations in 1937, Finland decided to get the rights to produce the model 1937 domestically starting in 1940 and classified it as the M40 or model 1940. Now with this model of helmet, there had been no previous combat or military experience for the most part with the design. However, based on its features and characteristics, it was still considered one of the best in its field and was also inexpensive to produce, as it was easily pressed from sheet steel. So there weren't a lot of downsides, and compared to previous designs, there wasn't much to lose in comparison to this design of the helmet. So Finley used the same drawings as were used in Sweden and acquired the necessary equipment and technical advice from AB Bofors in Sweden to begin production domestically. Now, the manufacture of these new helmets was then contracted through Wärtsilä Oy, and the manufacturing of the shells was located at, and I apologize for pronunciation here, a Konajasila's industrial plant in the middle of Helsinki, and the liners were manufactured by a separate company called Fritala Naka Oy. Now, the Defense Forces then, after establishing this contract with these Finnish companies, immediately placed an order for 70,000 helmets, which was produced over a 4-year period from 1940 to 1944, with an additional 5,000 helmets being delivered in mid-1944 until production was finally ceased when the Moscow Armistice was signed in September of that year. Now, despite the hastened production, only select units were ever received these helmets due to the fractional deliveries of the order, and this was caused by a number of things. There was still a number of technical difficulties getting the manufacturing up and running, but also it was caused more so by an unreliable steel supply because of the growing conflict and all these countries bidding to get as many materials as possible. They didn't have a really strong steel supply from any source, both domestically or internationally. So that caused major problems for the rearmament. So just to show this example a little bit, you can see the shell here, which looks very similar to the Swedish M1937. And this is what I was talking about with the condition. You'll see that it has a bullet strike or shrapnel strike here, and then a massive strike to the shell right there. You can see where it went in to the helmet and then hit the inside of the shell over here and cracked it. Now, to state whether this is during the war or after the war, there's no easy way to say. Unfortunately, with a lot of these types of helmets, people that didn't necessarily care about the history would just find a surplus helmet at a surplus store or whatever, or, you know, find it in a garage from a veteran, and then they would just shoot it with target practice, which I'm guessing that's what this is, but, you know, hopefully I'll be proven wrong eventually. And then this binder clip here, you'll see in a second, is actually holding the liner pads in place, and I'll talk about the liners in a second. But again, here's the shell. It's just a very basic design. So I'll set that there. So the helmet itself was made from Sandviken Obsteel, and it was made in 3 stages of deep drawing, followed by annealing, and then calibration to the correct shape. Now, calibration was followed by press turning, edge cutting, crimping, and hole punching, all of which were completed on a centrifugal press. Now, the shell was then finished off with a hardening process, which took place inside a salt bath, followed by the removal of any slag. And then finally, it was then coated in a rust protector and painted olive green, like what you see here, with paint supplied by Schilt and Hallberg in Finland. Now, the interior was then assembled consisting of 3 pillows supplied by the Fritalen Nakaoi company, like I said before, and was secured to the shell with some short steel strips and then 2 pins in each strip, which I'll show here. And you can see here, this liner pad is unfortunately torn, hence why I have the binder clip to try and keep it in place. But you'll see here, if you look under the torn piece, here, I'll zoom in there for you. If you look under the torn piece, there's that steel strip there, and then the pins go through the shell to hold it in place like that. And as you can see, much like the very popular liner design for European helmets in World War I, it's made up of 3 separate pillows tied together by a string in the center. Now, the 2-piece chin strap with a separate chin pad was fastened in with the liner pads using their pins, except for the largest sized helmet, the size 75, for which the strap had its own pair of pins further down into the shell. And you can see here, the pin right here lines up perfectly with where the strap is fastened in. You can see a swivel bail there connected in underneath the liner pad. Now, on my example, you'll see the chin strap here, the original chin strap. However, it does not have the chin cup, as most of the time, these were removed by the soldier or they were just lost over time. Now, coming back to the pins here, usually this would give you a count of 6 pins total throughout the shell. And those can be found in 2 different sizes, and I'll have some pictures up here to compare. On my example, you'll see the smaller flat pins. However, on other examples, which were produced later, you're going to see a beveled, larger pin going through the shell. So there's 2 variations there that you can find. Now, the helmet was produced in 4 sizes, being the size 66, 69, 72, and 75, where the size 69 is the most common, and 72 is the second most common, followed by 66 in third, and the 75 size shell, which is the least common. And in my research, I haven't been able to find a single photograph of any existing examples still of the 75 size shell with the separate pins for the chin strap in the side. Now, these helmets were marked with 2 distinguishing marks, being the rim stamp reading, for example, W69, and I'll actually put up a picture here of the stamp on my example. Usually they can be found on the inside edge of the rim, usually in the rear of the helmet. And the W stands for Wärtsilä, and the number then stands for the size, being 69, like I said. As well as, and the other example that you'll see of a mark is the red transfer label in the top of the shell, reading, and again, I apologize for the pronunciation here, Valmishnut Wärtsilä Yetima Oi. and translated to English that reads, manufactured by Wärtsilä Jätima Oy. And again, I'll have another picture up here of a mint example of that. And unfortunately, though, on modern examples of these helmets, the helmets themselves are few and far between. However, the label is even less common because for the fact that it was a transfer label, they were rubbed off very easily through use. So most of the time, you're not going to see them on modern examples. And although production of these helmets ended in September of 1944, their use was continued and almost fully standardized going into the Lapland War as they turned on the Germans due to the Soviet victory in Finland. And they couldn't use the style of helmet, and they couldn't use the German or Hungarian style of helmet how many troops had been using in the Winter War, obviously because the Germans had that model of shell. So if they were to use that, it would lead to a lot of confusion in friendly fire. So with that in mind, they then standardized the M40 as their helmet model for the short period of the Lapland conflict. So despite almost this exclusive use of the M40 in this short campaign, they were seldomly used as most troops covered their heads with warm winter caps due to the extremely low temperatures in the regions that the fighting was taking place during that conflict. However, you can still see many photographs of soldiers with these helmets with them, even if they're not wearing them. Now, following the end of the Lapland War in April of 1945, the German and Hungarian models went back to being the standard until 1978, along with the model 1962 helmet, which I'll get to soon. And because of that, the model 1940 helmet became extremely scarce. Following the end of that conflict, the Russians ordered that the vast majority, being around 50,000 or more of the remaining M1940s, were destroyed via melting them down or turning them into cooking pots, which were contracted through a number of companies, but the main one is a Wärtsilä subsidiary company. And this left approximately only 6,000 Model 1940s in Finland for special units only. Now, I've seen different people argue the validity of this claim, but based on my resources, that's what I've come to find that is accurate. There's only approximately 6,000 of these helmets remaining following the Lapland War. So now talking about modern examples, there's a number of variations you can find on the wartime examples that are both in the paint as well as in the liner. So the most common variation that you can see is first that the chin pad is almost always missing, as as I said before, they were easily lost over time and they were often removed by the soldiers. And again, that is missing on my example. Now, the next most common one is a wartime repaint. Now, from the factory, it came in a smooth dark green, as you can see on my example again. However, a lot of the times they were often repainted as they went to winter camouflage and then were repainted green, or they were reissued or refurbished or whatever, and they would repaint them with all kinds of different shades of green, similar to how the Germans did it in the Second World War. They would try to match it as best they can, and then often you'll be able to see that with brush strokes being present in the paint. Now, lastly, you have wartime liner pad replacements, which can sometimes be hard to spot, but usually if you have multiple shades of brown leather pads, it's safe to assume that the darker ones are the factory original leather, and then lighter colored ones are often the wartime replacements. Now, both of them are original Winter War examples on these helmets, and they don't decrease the value. However, it's an interesting, additional thing that you can know about your helmet. Now, in rare cases, you can also find cloth liner pad replacements as well, and I've only ever been able to find pictures of one example, which I'll have up here, but most of the time it's going to be the leather pads. Now, lastly, you can also find multiple pillow colors under the leather or cloth, usually being in blue or white. Those are the only two examples that I've been able to find. However, there might be additional ones out there that I'm unaware of. Now, occasionally, you may also find the very rare painted helmet markings, such as diamonds, which I'm not sure exactly what they stand for, a star something, or a star-looking emblem, which I couldn't find any original photographs of, but I found this modern example for sale on a reliable website that specializes in Finnish militaria that they claim stands for anti-aircraft. And then even the famous skull and crossbones for a battalion of death, which you have to be very, very weary of because they're already extremely faked on German model helmets. However, it's extremely likely that they could be faked on Finnish model helmets as well. So you just have to be very weary about it. You have to know what to look for. I managed to find a original photograph of it to prove that they did in fact exist, but when it comes to finding a modern example, it's possible that none exists today. Now, telling it apart from other helmet models. Now, the two models that the M40 is most often mixed up with is the M1937 that we've already discussed, as well as the M1962. So the M1937 identification is fairly easy. So the first thing you want to do is look at the color. If it's a gray colored paint, you can automatically assume that it's Swedish. The Finnish never painted their helmets in gray. And it's especially apparent if the helmet has the blue crest with the gold crowns as present on most Swedish helmet examples. Now, number two, you can look at the rim stamp. If it doesn't have another, again, I'll use the example W69, so essentially W and then the double-digit size numbers that I've listed before, and rather has something like a number and then a letter and then a number, then it's Swedish. And I'll have some examples up here of what those look like side by side. So, for instance, an example of a Swedish stamp would be 72L41. And then the third thing that you can look for lastly is the interior. If the chin strap has two rivets holding it onto the bales instead of the one, like on the Finnish examples, then it's Swedish. Now, it's possible that it could just have a Swedish chin strap on it, but it's safe to assume that you need to be wary of that is not an original chin strap. That's going to be a Swedish chin strap if it has the two rivets. Now, the M1962 is a bit more complicated, as some have the old liner from World War II and some have the new liner. So I'm not going to go into the full history of the development and the production of the model 1962. That'll be for a different video in the future. However, the easiest way to identify the difference is, one, look at the liner. If it has a web liner or a web chin strap instead of leather, it's an M62. That's another pretty clear giveaway. Now, number three, if you're still not sure, like for instance, if it still has the old liner system, as I believe a couple of thousand of the very first M62s did have the original liners from World War II in them, then look at the rim stamp. If it's a number with a crown over it, and then not the W69, for instance, then it's an M62. Or if it has the stamp, meaning like W69, but it has the wrong pins or the wrong liner and chin strap, etc. Essentially, if it doesn't match up the previous two that I said, then it is not an original M40, because there's also examples of reused World War II shells that were updated to the M62 standard. So, I mean, that might hold a little bit more value to a collector, having an original World War II shell but have a modern liner in it, than a completely new helmet. However, just know that that's still considered a model 1962 and not a model 1940, even if it has the original World War II production stamps. And that's just about it for this video. I spent a good amount of time trying to diversify my resources and see as many different examples as I can to include in this video. The model 1940 Finnish combat helmet is a very complicated and under-discussed topic, and I couldn't find any YouTube videos about it anywhere, and even written sources are very seldomly found. So I wanted to publish this video for you guys, as when I got this helmet, I thought it was a Swedish M37, until I finally started digging in and spending hours of research to put together this video for you guys. So, like I said, that's all for this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button, and when you're in that area, hit the subscription button and notification bell. I have plenty of other videos coming in the near future, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!